Welcome everybody. This is Bayer with Sun Chasing Success. We've got another amazing episode today, and this is a very, very great guest. I've known him for almost 20 years now, learning about entrepreneurship. His name is Walt F.J. Goodridge, and he's a former civil engineer, and he was a frustrated employee who quit his job to escape the rat race and pursue his passion for writing and helping others. And he's the author of Turn Your Passion into Profit and over 24 unique books and products based on his passion, profit, philosophy, and formula. So Walt escaped from America to live on Saipan in 2006. And he's written several books about Saipan and Guam as well. And he received a Senate resolution for his contribution to CNMI Society for his many websites, books, and projects. He also writes freelance articles for the Saipan Tribune, Marianas Variety, and Guam Business Journal. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Columbia University in New York and is originally from the island of Jamaica. And Walt is going to be one of our featured guests here on Sun Chasing Success to join us on a regular basis and help us really hone in and implement key strategies and important cornerstone principles essential to online business. And today he's going to share some information and inspire us with ideas about turning your passion into profit, even during these pandemic times. And so his website, you can find all his great books and information is passionprofit.com. That's www.passionprofit.com. And without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, author, passionpreneur, nomadpreneur, career coach, blogger, and speaker, Walt Goodridge. Welcome.
Hey, Bayo, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Having me here. With all that great introduction, you'd think I'd have a better webcam for my.
Hey, man, we're making it work. Some people are going to see this on YouTube. Other people are only going to hear us. So either way, we're fine. We'll make it through. I think they can see us good.
Great. Just one thing, when you mentioned the introduction, you mentioned CNMI Society. And for people who don't know, I'm here on the island of Saipan, which is actually part of something called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. So we say CNMI for short. So for people who might have been confused by what you were talking about, I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for clearing that up. And so it's been quite a journey for you. I mean, we're talking about now you grew up in Jamaica, right?
Yes, that's correct.
How many years were you in Jamaica before you lived in New York?
I came to America when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I have to be careful about giving certain details about my age because
okay, no worries.
That's one of my secrets. I came when I was 9 years old.
Okay, and so this is interesting because I met you, I think it was around 2003. You had a book about starting your own hip hop record label called Change the Game. And I was in the DC area. Some people have heard on this podcast me talk about some of my journeys from Virginia to DC to New York. And it was in that time span that I ran into you. And your books were always amazing to me. And then a few years later, you were like, hey, Jamaican leaving New York. I'm going to Saipan. So yeah. I've always found your story interesting. And I think it's really amazing. Give us a little bit of that background for those who maybe haven't met you or heard of you. Just give us that feeling of that growing up in New York. You got a degree in engineering, and then you made this transition. Can you just give us the summary of how that process went for those who don't know?
Sure. As mentioned, I was born in Jamaica, West Indies, went to school there. My early schooling and education was in Jamaica. My parents moved me to the United States, and I went to high school, went to college in the U.S., majored in civil engineering. Now, the only reason I ended up in engineering at that time was because when I was in high school, my guidance counselor, Miss Charlotte Huey from England, she said, you're good in math and science, you need to be a civil engineer. So at the time, I was doing what every good student does. I just followed, what my counselors and teachers and relatives said I should do. So I went into engineering. I went to Columbia, majored in civil, graduated, and started working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I was working on the 72nd floor of the World Trade Center. This was before, 9/11. And but I realized within the first 15 minutes of my first day in corporate America, I realized beyond a shadow of a doubt that I absolutely hated it.
Wow.
There were guys there when I was on my first day, first week on the job. There were guys there who had just started working there, just like me, and they were already planning their entire 40-year careers. I remember it well. They were sitting there saying, okay, then I'll get to this position, then I'll get to that position, then I'll retire here. And so they were mapping out on their first week on the job, they were mapping out what they were going to do at the Port Authority for the next 40 years.
Wow.
That scared me. That scared me because
I
one,
hear you.
I didn't really like engineering. I only chose it because it was
Okay.
a little more interesting than the other fields, but it just wasn't me. So I never really liked working. I never liked working for somebody else. Never liked working um, for a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
But at the time, no one had ever asked me, what is it that you love to do? I mean, that just wasn't the sort of thing that was a topic of discussion. You just did what was the smart, practical thing to do. So I believe that that was what life was about. But I realized, as I said, that I was very unhappy. So I always was looking for a way to escape. I started a sideline business. I started, when I was at Columbia, I did a radio station for a few years. So I had a little interest and background in music. I
Mm-hmm.
was I was Sir Walt, the reggae DJ on WKCR FM New York. And when I started thinking about what else I would rather do, I looked to the music industry and started designing record labels, managing artists, and eventually started a record label with one of the artists, and eventually broke that up and went my own way and started my own record label, putting out hip hop artists. And then I transitioned to doing something else. And the story, if you don't mind, I'll just tell you the brief
No, go
story
ahead.
about that. That's really critical to the
Yes.
passion concept. I was running my record label for about a year, 2 years. We had a certain amount of success. We had our videos played on BET, on Ralph McDaniel's Video Music Box. We had, certain successes, but the money wasn't rolling in the way I wanted it to. But I was still accomplishing a lot. So someone who had seen our records in a record store called me up and said, hey, Mr. Goodridge, I saw your record label in whatever Record Explosion in New York. Now, how did you get that done? What did you do to get your record produced yourself and out into the market? So for the next hour or so, I sat and I just told him, first you do this, then you do that, then you do this, then you do that. And after the whole hour and a half conversation, he said, wow, thank you for all that information. I would have been willing to pay you for it if you had asked me. And that's when the light bulb went off. And I said, at that time, this was in the 90s, at that time, there was no step-by-step guide for showing young hip hop entrepreneurs how to release their own music and start their own record label. So I, with no writing experience, decided that I would sit down and write a book to show step by step how to do that. And I was still working as a civil engineer at the time, so I would, go to work, get up 6 o'clock, go to work in the morning, come back, write my book through all hours of the night. And at the time, there was a music industry festival called the Jack the Rapper Music Festival.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I wanted to debut the book at that conference. So I ended up writing a 250-page step-by-step manual in 4 weeks.
Wow.
So my first book, and the reason I was able to do that is because no one ever told me, well, you can't write a 250-page book in 4 weeks. So that's what I did. But that was because I always had that desire to teach. Even when I was in elementary school, I was tutoring other students. When I was in high school, I was tutoring other students. When I was in college, I was teaching kids, other students, helping them pass their exams and get through. So looking back, I realized that the thread that was always running through my life was the desire to teach others. So that is why when I transitioned now to writing books, step-by-step how-to books, that's when the success really came. And I was able to match my civil engineering income from the sales of that one book. So after publishing the book, released, selling it through mail order, because this was before the days of the internet, I was making about 50,000 a year as a civil engineer. And I was making another $4,000 a month or so selling this single book through mail order, with my PO box down at the World Trade Center. And so I can get into more details, but essentially I was faced with this challenge. And the challenge was, do I quit my job? I was matching my income, and I went to school for 4 years, got a civil engineering degree, and was making 50,000 a year. I wrote a book in 4 weeks and was making the same amount of money that I was making as my first, but I still couldn't bring myself to quit my job. So because I had the fear that things would just fall apart. So anyway, I'll end the story there. But to make a long story even longer, I ended up quitting my job, jumping out into on my own, and becoming a full-time passionpreneur. So that's the story of how I. Yeah, go ahead.